Hello everyone, Squintina here, and we will be continuing the job controller setup guides with Sage. This will have many parallels with the Scholar setup I released, so I'm going to leave a picture of that one up as reference. This video will primarily explain the setup. If you are not interested in the explanation, feel free to skip ahead using the description timestamps of chapters. But first, let's go over some terminology very quickly. Feel free to skip to the next section if you've seen this in another video. I call this the primary cross hotbar. For me, this is set 1. Above is the double cross hotbar. I have this on set 3, and you can configure this in character configuration, hotbar settings, above the cross, and custom section. You access this by double tapping. I do have the expanded enabled. This is by using both L2 and R2, or R2 and L2. I have this set to set 2, and this is customizable in character configuration as well. If you would like to learn more about this, I do have a video specifically on my customization settings, and there should be a card that pops up right now for you to click on if you wish to see it. Other terminology I will be using: a GCD is an action that activates the global cooldown. The game typically calls these spells or weapon skills, though there are a few exceptions. Actions that do not activate the global cooldown are called abilities, once again with a few exceptions. They are also called OGCDs, which means off the global cooldown. Let's talk about actions. I will mostly be going in the order in the compact view and starting with our GCDs. Diagnosis. I prefer to put my GCDs on action buttons, and I do favor the right side for damage, so Diagnosis, being a healing GCD, will be on the left. Prognosis. AoE GCD heals are well suited on the expanded hotbar. You don't really need to see them, and it's not like you have to target them anyway, so the extra finger movement to get to the expanded compared to the primary is well overcome. Agero and Swiftcast. All healers will have their Resurrection and Swiftcast on the double cross hotbar on the left side. Keeping them together makes logical sense, but we also need to be able to see Swiftcast cooldown at all times, hence the double cross hotbar. However, we don't want it on the right side because if you're with a group that knows what they're doing, you will hopefully not be using this too often. Dosis. Let me skip Eukrasia for just a moment to talk about Dosis, our main damage attack. As stated earlier, I favor the right side, so our damage needs to go there. This will match up with Scholar's Broil, but what about the damage over time? So, Eukrasia. Since Eukrasia enables Dosis to become a damage over time like Scholar's Biolysis, it makes sense for it to use the same spot. But wait, there's more! Eukrasia also turns Prognosis into a shielded AoE heal just like Succor. So why isn't it going into Succor's spot? Well, no, I decided that for the sake of muscle memory, it would be best to keep this on the circle button on all hotbar locations. So Eukrasia will also be on the action right button in the expanded. I did briefly consider changing Scholar's Succor to reflect this, but decided it wasn't necessary. Phlegma was hard to place. It's an instant, so it's like a mobility action, and I like my mobility actions to be on the left action button. Technically, Toxikon is the better action from a mobility perspective, but Phlegma being more powerful than Dosis makes it also used in single target content, so it's better suited for the right side since that's the side I favor. It's still possible to use Phlegma for mobility for conals and other mechanics where you can stay in melee range. Dyskrasia. For AoE damage, I usually like to put those on the expanded. However, for healers, it makes more sense for it to go on the left side on the primary. This is for two reasons. One, the expanded is used for AoE healing and other occasional actions that are specific to healers, and two, dungeon healing often means going from your AoE attack to a healing OGCD, many of which will be on the primary, so this will go on the left side. Toxikon is another AoE damage action, but it is also a mobility action once you earn some charges. Because of its AoE status, it will go on the left side. However, its mobility alternative to Phlegma means it can go into our backup mobility spot on the expanded too. This is optional, but if you play other jobs where I might have the mobility action on the expanded, this will feel very natural. Pneuma is a powerful heal and damage action that also happens to have a long cooldown and happens to be on the GCD. In the end, I chose the double cross hotbar on the right side on the action button. This still keeps it very accessible to keep that GCD rolling while also keeping the cooldown visible, and the long 120-second cooldown even matches up with Scholar's Seraph cooldown. Before we move on to abilities, let's finish up role and general actions. In general, there is Limit Break. I placed this in the same spot for all of my jobs on the left side on the double cross hotbar. This is what I consider to be one of the most inaccessible spots to hopefully reduce accidental usage. Repose might be a GCD technically, but it's only used for very specific circumstances. As such, it doesn't deserve to follow my GCD rules and will go on the expanded on the D-pad because I don't really need to see it, and the action slots can be used for more important actions. Isuna. I used to have Isuna on the left side of the double cross hotbar. Then I was progging Alexander Ultimate and realized it was not great in content where multiple people needed to be Isuna'd in a row, so now it's on the expanded. It's fine on the D-pad since you have to target a party member anyway. Lucid Dreaming. This is a resource ability since it gives MP. I like to put resource abilities on the double cross hotbar on the top and bottom. This one goes on the bottom. Swiftcast was already talked about with Resurrection, so we can skip it. Surecast goes on the right double cross hotbar on the D-pad. This ensures you can see the cooldown, have strong muscle access to it because it's on the right side, and my build once again favors the right, but still try to prevent accidents by placing it on the D-pad. Rescue can be a powerful tool, but it has very limited use due to its long cooldown. It can also be really inconvenient if it's used by accident, so I definitely want it on the double cross hotbar on the left side on the D-pad, just like Limit Break. Back to our job actions, we can look at our abilities. Cardio is interesting to place. Since it allows a heal over time, through damage, it logically should be where the single target region is. However, you're not really using it multiple times per fight. Most content it will be on one person the entire time. Some fights it will be switching tanks, and maybe during exploration content you might be switching it to other players, so it's just not worth putting it in the primary where, for example, Scholar's Etherflow would be. It's more of a stance, and I would normally have that where Rescue currently is, but I just put it on the double cross hotbar on the left side on the action bar. It's in a low priority area. You do have the ability to easily access it if you do need to switch targets, and Sage has so few actions, it's not a big deal anyway. On the other hand, Soteria is used a bit more often. It is used as a buff to Cardia. If you view Cardia as base healing, then Soteria's buff is like having an extra regen on top of it, so that one makes more sense in the single target region spot on the primary. Icarus. Sage is the only healer with a jump ahead action with Icarus, but plenty of other jobs have such abilities. I typically put actions like these on the double cross hotbar on the right in the top action spot. Druochole. So with Scholar, I use the primary right side D-pad for resource healing. Let's trade, Indom, Excog, Recitation. Sage can follow very closely, so Druochole will go on the left, Ixochole goes on the top, Taurochole goes on the right, and Rhizomata goes on the bottom. Doing this makes it really obvious where resource healing is. Of course, that still leaves one. Taurochole will go on the D-pad top, just like Ixochole, since they're both for AoE healing, but Taurochole will go on the double cross hotbar. This will match with Scholar's Sacred Soul, which also uses the resource. Looking at the other healers, theirs are ground targeted AoEs, while Sage is an automatically centered AoE. Players for the other healers would potentially want a macro, while Sage's doesn't need a macro. Thing is, this expansion I decided to allocate for both a macro and non-macro spot for ground actions, and Taurochole not being ground targeted means I don't actually need to put it in two places, but I will just for parity. the double-cross hotbar, and the expanded. Feel free to pick only one of those spots if you don't want to use both. Zoe will go on the double-cross hotbar on the right. I normally use this spot as a party damage buff or a self-damage buff. Sage has neither of those, so it's getting its healing buff in there. Pepsis grants an extra heal if your shields are still up. There is no real comparison to Scholar, but it can be used as a type of AoE heal, so might as well go to the D-pad's top. That means it'll go on the primary's left side. It also reminds me a bit of Astrologian's Horoscope, which was in this spot in the previous expansion setup. Physis is an AoE regen ability. It can still be used for single target healing since it's an ability, so it doesn't have to go on the expanded. It belongs on the D-pad on the left side. Haima having 5 stacks makes it unique to Sage, and it has a long 120-second cooldown. I've often used the primary's left side for a few job unique actions with long cooldowns. Holos is a party mitigation. I like for party mitigation to be on the double cross hotbar. It could be on either of those spots. I chose the right one for Holos, and I chose the left one for Haima, which is also a party mitigation. That leaves Krasis, which is another healing buff. There are a few spots left to choose from, but it has great synergy with Scholar's Protraction, which was placed on the D-pad's right side. General. Sprint doesn't go on any cross hotbars, at least not for my setup. Instead, you can set the right click in, also known as R3, to do a macro and place it there. General actions do not have action queuing, so there is no queuing loss from using a macro. You can place it on a regular hotbar if you want to see the cooldown. This is the only action I have on a regular hotbar for visibility purposes. The last 2 spots up top are for your elixirs and ethers, or whatever other consumables you wish to have. And that's it! This creates a very familiar setup between Scholar and Sage. Could it be done differently? Sure. I could have treated Pepsis more like an emergency tactics and a fate blessing, but overall I feel this works out fairly intuitively for me as a Scholar main. Even back when I was newer to Sage and I would sometimes forget what actions did what, it usually worked out well enough to press a button and hope the result was similar enough. Of course, please do learn your actions, but the similar builds should help with muscle memory until you get to that point. And with all that, I must now say goodbye and go work on the video for Astrologian. Take care, and I guess hit that like button if you want to, or not, I'm not forcing you. See you next time!